I just want to emphasize, because the speeches that were given was that the Trump tax reforms, which lowered the rate on corporations from whatever it was, 28 to 21 or whatever it was a bad thing. And they wanted to go in the other direction. But you're saying that that's a harebrained scheme. What economists know that the politicians seem to willfully ignore, and what the demagoguery of political discourse overlooks when you put on a good green eye shade and you know what you're talking about. What about billionaires and corporations? I listened to the rhetoric at the Democratic National Convention, and they want to go after the billionaires, the millionaires and billionaires, the rich people who are not paying their fair share. Do you know what Warren Buffett's secretary pays? Do you know, et cetera, et cetera? What about the fallacy of that? And what about the idea that rich corporations, so we're going to tax rich corporations in order to get them to pay their fair share, when in fact, the incidence of the corporate income tax is a very complicated product, and you live in an international, a global economic system, et cetera. What about that?
Okay, so let me break this into two pieces. First of all, on the billionaires, we have the way the tax system is set up, billionaires can pay essentially zero. Okay, all they have to do is they have assets which they have in basically stocks or other securities that are not paying out income, and they just let those assets appreciate. And since they're not realizing any capital gains, they're not paying any taxes on it. Meanwhile, they're borrowing money for all their consumption, and they're borrowing at a low rate. So through time, they're paying no taxes, basically. I think we need to be changing the entire tax structure, get rid of, think about this. Suppose we move to a progressive cash flow consumption tax, where we tax everybody's consumption, including billionaires' consumption, on a global basis, so that and we would impute rent, we would impute the consumption value of your yacht, your Learjet.
What do you mean tax on excuse me for interrupting, I just want to understand. What do you mean tax on a global basis? You mean the countries coordinate their taxes?
No, we would have people, report their consumption if they have, and their assets. If they have a yacht parked in Majorca, okay, they would have to report it. We would impute a consumption value to it. That would be part of the tax base for determining their consumption tax. We would tax.
Okay, so we're getting rid of the income tax system.
And the corporate income tax, because the corporate income tax, to get back to that, it's surely a tax on workers. When the Democrats claim that corporations need to be taxed more, what they're talking about is taxing American workers at a higher rate. Now, it seems like if you tax corporations, you're taxing the owners of corporations, but those corporations can get up and move their capital abroad. And what they do is they leave behind their workers, and their workers have less capital to work with, and therefore their wages fall. So the ultimate incidence, the ultimate burden is falling on the workers. Most economists believe this is the case, that the corporate tax is actually a hidden tax on workers. And I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I ran against both of those parties twice, okay? At great personal financial expense, but some expense in terms of my family and friends thinking I was lunatic, crazy. Okay, now many of them are saying, "I wish you were running today."
Fat chance.
I have a lot of people saying that these days.
Yeah, but you weren't going to win. That was my previous point about expertise is not what's driving the show here. But go ahead. I want to hear about the incidence of the corporate income tax.
So I do think we should get rid of it, or at least we should just set it at the minimum level that Treasury Secretary Yellen has set, which is 15%, and be the most.
I just want to emphasize, because the speeches that were given was that the Trump tax reforms, which lowered the rate on corporations from whatever it was, 28 to 21 or whatever it was a bad thing, and they wanted to go in the other direction. But you're saying that that's a harebrained scheme.
That itself is harebrained, but what I'm talking about is getting rid of the corporate tax, the federal income tax, and replacing and making the FICA tax more progressive and then having a highly progressive personal consumption tax that ensures that the billionaires pay taxes on their consumption, which is what we really care about. Warren Buffett, we don't really want to be taxing Warren Buffett because he's rich. We want to tax Warren Buffett if he's spending a lot of his money, because if he's not, he's leaving it to somebody. He's going to actually leave his money to his 5 kids. And I think it's 5 kids.
I think he said he was going to put it in a foundation, didn't he?
Well, he decided not to give it to the Gates Foundation.
But the understanding is the kids would create some other kind of philanthropy.
Their own funds, which they're going to give to the public. So I think if the kids spend the money on themselves, hey,
they should be
taxed. But if they're spending on you and poor people and healthcare, or helping people in Africa drill wells or get mosquito nets, God bless them. They're probably doing
one of the things about a consumption tax is basic. It's going to encourage savings, isn't it?
Yeah, and our country is saving 3% of national income. We used to, in the 50s, we were saving, in the 60s, 13% of national income. If you look at the data, which I've been calculating for decades now, the national saving rate has gone from there down, had a few wiggles, but basically it's a straight line downhill. The domestic investment rate has gone from about the same 13, 14% down to about 4% of GDP, national income. So we're doing exactly what's happening is exactly what economic theory says should happen if you run the policies we've been running. And part of those policies are taking from young savers and giving to old spenders. That's one of the major reasons we're saving so little. And also incentives to save are important here too. And but the main thing is the redistribution through a whole lot of different programs for decades. We've changed the tax structure to put more of the burden on young people. We've expanded these important social insurance programs, but we've done it in a way where, in the process, we've taken from the young and given to the old. We financed them as Ponzi schemes. We've set up, program after program to help the poor, and each one of them is helping to lock the poor into poverty. So we need to rethink our entire welfare system and in a way that doesn't, disincentivize people to work. I mean, here's an example. Suppose you think about food stamps. If you earn an extra $1 of food stamps, you lose, I think, 20 cents on the dollar in, if you work and earn an extra $1,000, you're going to lose $200 in food stamps, is my understanding. Now, what if we did it differently? What if we said we're going to have federal government distribute food and give food in schools and low-income neighborhoods? There'll be distribution of food in low-income neighborhoods, and there'll be free breakfast, lunch, and dinner in schools and also on weekends for the residents of low-income neighborhoods. Now, do you think a rich person from, let's say, the Back Bay in Boston is going to go to Roxbury to go get a free? They're not. So it's not going to disincentivize work. That's the way you can.
No, I like the idea. I mean, it's really very clever. And I just want to highlight something I think that's going there. You're leveraging the shame. The thing is, there's this incentive problem. If you want to have a benefit or a tax, you're going to distort. And, that's going to have a dead weight loss associated with it. It's going to have an incentive cost to it. And you want to minimize that. So you want to target the food aid, and rather than having it be a grant to people based on their income, having it be an in-kind provision, and you don't worry about the exploitation of the in-kind by the people who don't need it, because you have the shame. You have the shame cost going with it, which is a very clever way of taking a social thing. Just let me make the point, Larry. Because we're economists talking about incentives and margins and prices, but we're using society. We're using judgment of other people about who's a good person and whatnot, and to accomplish our economic goal. And I think there's a lot of stuff like that. For example, suppose we were talking about unwed pregnancy. Suppose we were talking about early childhood pregnancy. The shame of being a person with a baby born out of wedlock might be a useful instrument in encouraging, or I should say discouraging, the behavior. What about criminal behavior? What about youth detention centers and things of this kind. I just want to make the point that there's something interesting here for
You know, I think-
socio-economic analysis.